How are you? It's been a while.
I know. It's been busy.
Been busy? Have you been busy?
Busier last year than I am this year.
Really? What's your status right now? Are you still kind of doing the full time plus the consulting or what?
Yeah, so I've moved like fully into fractional GC practice last year, right? January. But I do still have my like former full-time employer as like my anchor client.
Nice. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was starting to scale down on that front, and it was probably one of the main reasons I decided to branch out because I knew eventually that they would scale down and rather be the master of my own destiny.
Yeah. That's literally how it worked for me when I left Blend. I just took Blend as my first client.
Right. It's going well so far. But yeah, definitely winding down.
Nice.
Thanks for your New Year's card. It was great. Great to see the little one and the dog.
That picture was really funny. Like, it just like we didn't think we were actually gonna put them in the same shot. Um, my dog was like going crazy at the beach, but they both laid down next to each other. It was great.
That's great. Yeah, it was a really great photo.
Thanks. Hey everyone,
What's going on, everybody? Hey, Brian.
how's it going, Daniel?
Hello.
Another beautiful day in paradise.
It truly is. It's a special, special place we live in.
I'm sorry for everyone who's experiencing winter. Us in San Diego, we don't know winter.
From New
Maybe
York
tomorrow.
originally.
Doesn't a single season get monotonous though?
You ever see that Daniel Tosh stand up?
I know who he is, but I haven't seen it.
He's like, I think the bit is like, people are like, aren't you tired of, or don't you like seasons? He's like, yeah, that's why I live in the place where we have the best season all year round.
I've seen that. That's good.
All right,
I don't know. My kids were super excited. We don't get snow in Atlanta very often, but we got like a few inches this past weekend, and oh my, I think my kids were happier with snow than they were with like the Christmas presents. So that was really nice.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
my
left
brother.
my snow shovel in Maryland, but I thought I had to like buy one from Home Depot again.
Yeah, that's crazy to think about buying a snow shovel in Atlanta. Imagine they don't normally have this in stock.
No.
My brother lives in Dallas and said they got some snow, which is just absurd.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We'll let people trickle in for one more minute and we'll get started. Shaz, you got the Christmas tree still going. You're still living the Christmas spirit.
Yeah, it takes a lot for me to force myself to put it away. This weekend, I've decided.
It'll come back next year.
It's just, I look around once I take everything down, I'm like, oh, everything looks so sad.
I
It takes
respect
a few
that.
months to remember I like my home, but at first I'm just like, ugh.
I get it.
Holiday decorations do make the home look more festive. I
Right?
also miss it when they come down because it's like, oh, still like it, but like it was just very festive with all like the Christmassy stuff up.
Oh, razzle dazzle. I mean, I have a tinsel tree in my own office.
I just took our tree down, and it's a live tree, and so disposing of it felt I don't know, unceremonious. I took a saw to the tree, and there were pine needles everywhere. It was murderous, and I put it in the sort of the green waste bin, and it was sad. It was a sad, sad day.
Absolutely, you took saw to it.
Somewhere in my head, I hear taps.
I never grew up with Christmas trees because I'm Jewish, but I have always wondered, you know, what is the calculus when you're deciding whether or not you want a live one or one that is a fake tree that you. I mean, I guess if you reuse it for a while, it's worth it if you do a fake tree, but like people seem to really prefer the real thing.
My wife really prefers a real tree. I really prefer an artificial tree, so we have a real tree.
I think it smells because it's really nice and festive when you have the Christmas tree that smells smithy at home. But I also lost the battle with my husband, and we have a fake one. How much?
I always grew up with trees because it's just, you know, the easier route. You can keep the lights on, put it in the box, bring it out.
A Christmas tree bag, so every season it looks like we're like dragging this body bag out of the basement and bringing it up, and the neighbors kind of give us a side eye.
You should definitely just cover that bag in like ketchup and.
It's red and green. At least it's not black. So like.
That's amazing.
All right. We're 5 minutes in, so let's kick this thing off. It seems like we got critical mass. So I kind of forget what spawned the idea for this, but I like the idea. We all have a either we're all in on the fractional GC model, or a piece of our practice is fractional GC, and that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But there's also a ton of similarities, and I think we can all learn from each other in how we practice as fractional general counsel. And so I wanted to do this monthly meetup and provide some structure, but also leave it somewhat unstructured. So there's like some of that good just conversation, so we can kind of take this wherever we want to take it. But I did come up with an agenda. And that agenda really is going to be focused on what makes your practice, what makes you unique, what's your differentiator. And there's really two components to that where I want to dig in more. One is like, how do you differentiate yourself from traditional law practice, which I think when we all get on the phone with a client, that's really what we're pitching, because we're kind of going up against years and years of conditioning of what a law firm and what a lawyer is and should be. So it's really good to differentiate ourselves there. But also, you know, there's 22 of us on this call, and 43 of people, 43 fractional GCs just in our HeyCounsel fractional GC group. So we're going to start competing against each other, which is good, right? It means there's something here. There's enough kind of like work to go around, and there's increasing appetite for this type of practice. But it also means we need to figure out how we're different from everyone else, and we're all obviously very different. But it's good to know why you're different and what you, Fight Club. Why you stand out, or why the client should choose you. So that's really what I wanted to focus on. And so I broke it down into the category of why you're different from traditional law firms, and I definitely want to hear people's thoughts on what makes them unique, either from their background, from their pricing model, or just the way you approach working with a client day to day. And it could be a mix of all three, but obviously that's something that you need to bottle up and pitch, and talk about in a concise way, so that the client or potential client understands that even when they come to your website, they should kind of know, oh wow, this is a different experience than I'm used to, and that have that make a positive impact on them, so that they move forward. And then there's the different from other GCs or fractional GCs. So like, how are you different on those points, or from a different perspective, how are you different? And then we can talk a little bit about how we pitch on the phone, how we pitch on our website, things like that. So I'm sure there are things popping up in all of your heads right now. I definitely want to hear from you all. I mean, when I think about my practice, I usually start just with my background, and I think it's somewhat unique that I've never been inside a big law firm. I was trained literally from what I call inside the matrix. I started in-house. I've always been in-house. So my approach is always an in-house approach where we're weighing business objectives and they hold a lot of weight in my decisions versus, making sure that we have every single base from a legal perspective covered to the point that it slows the business down. So I talk a lot about my experience kind of being boots on the ground, building products, things like that. So that's very much a part of my pitch. And then pricing, I'm very traditional. I generally do an hourly rate. I've done a couple flat fee engagements that have actually been pretty great. So maybe I should reevaluate whether or not I go more into a flat fee type practice or kind of like monthly fee practice. And then I absolutely double down on my approach. So when I talk to clients, I always talk about the fact that I scope every project. You'll never be surprised by a bill. They'll always know exactly what I'm working on. I will give them updates. They'll be over updated. They will be asking me to tell them less. And I do that because I've had a lot of poor experiences being on the other side as an in-house lawyer, getting services from outside firms, getting a bill at the end and being blown away by how expensive it is and what the hell did they do with all their time. So I want people to have a very different experience. So I would say my two big differentiators are my background and my approach, and those two things kind of make sense because they play off of each other. So that's I guess what I think about when I pitch. But I definitely want to hear. So yeah, Jason, you raised your hand, so I'll start with you.
Yeah, I wonder if our differentiators are as different as we think, because my pitch is very similar to yours, Brian, that I've been an in-house lawyer my entire legal career. And so again, like I've even used the term like trained inside the matrix before. So that's really funny to me. But yeah, I think that's one of my key differentiators is like, hey, I've always been in-house. I've always recognized the importance of the business decision. That's the framework that I'm thinking through, not like, hey, this is the legal ramifications and you make the business. It's like, here's the legal ramifications, here's the business decision we should make. And like, I can provide that full comprehensive solution to you as opposed to like, here's the 50 options that you can take that other big law folks might give you. Also just emphasize the value for the rate, right? Like as a solo fractional GC, I can bring that same value that those big lawyers have, but because I'm practicing out of my house and leveraging all the resources that my family would otherwise use, like don't take my low rate as a thing of like low value, but rather like I'm able to provide these great services to you because my overhead is so low. You're not paying for my lights or anything like that. And so like that's really why the rate is what it is. And I think clients really love that. I think the other thing for me is because I'm so used to being in-house, I love being plugged into my clients like Slack and G Drive, and I kind of work with AR, right? And so they're not sending me an email and waiting for an email to come back. It's like, hey, I got a quick question, ping me on Slack, right? And like there are some answers on Slack where it's like, yeah, it's just a quick like yes, no, you can do this. And there's no 0.1 on my bill for that, right? Like there's not a lot of 0.1s on my bills whatsoever because like, I don't know, again, not being a law firm lawyer, I'm just not used to billing by the minute. And that's still a struggle for me. One time I tried to do the flat fee billing, it kind of bit me in the butt. And so I've shied away from that. Again, kind of gone back to hourly billing because once you start to do the flat fee, my experience has been, it's like, okay, things that didn't ordinarily come to you do. Like, for example, I was like, I'll review all of your contracts for some amount of monthly fee, but then I started getting like, inconsequential contracts, like, hey, review this swag contract from our vendor for like a couple of t-shirts, and it's like, hey, we weren't really doing this. And so anyway, that's probably a little bit my fault in terms of like not scoping it in properly, but I think these are some of the things that differentiate me, which I'm curious would actually differentiate me, because I wonder if I'm about to hear the same story 21 times right now.
Well, I think there's definitely a level of nuance. I think that once we start to hear other people's stories, maybe we can maybe not we're not going to change who we are, but we can be a little bit more nuanced in what makes us different from each other. But yeah, I agree. We'll probably have a lot of similarities. Damien, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, and I wanted to go soon because I'm actually in the car right now. I gotta install a toilet at my wife's business. It's fun stuff. A bit of a break from practicing law, getting my hands dirty, so to speak. So I just launched my practice earlier this year in May, and I've seen quite a bit of success. My differentiator is I'm the one of only two registered social purpose law corporations in California. And basically what that is a for-profit corporation with a baked-in social purpose. It's in the articles and throughout my bylaws and so on. And that social purpose is high-level legal advice for accessible rates. If you guys, I posted on the Slack channel about rates. I don't charge more than $300 an hour. And I could easily bill out at $750 plus, given my experience and background. But I'm intentionally under market, and the reason for that is I have just a different life purpose than I had when I first started practicing. I want to support folks who would otherwise get priced out of the legal market. That approach has, I post my rates online, for example, like complete transparency. My terms are online. I further discount my $300 rate for minority women and student-owned small businesses and nonprofits. I also, because my rates are so low, I've attracted many nonprofit and government agencies who support small businesses, like chambers of commerce, the local small business development center network. I support all of Northern California, so that's representative of 20,000 small businesses. They want to expand into SoCal, so there's a possibility that I might be the go-to law firm for all of California's, SBDC small business centers. The SBDC is funded by the SBA, the Small Business Administration. I support the local MBDA, which is a minority business development agency, and they're under the Department of Commerce. So it's just a great, kind of like feel good practice that I got myself into. I support a lot of small businesses. My monthly revenue and hours have steadily increased every month to where I think I'm going to get to full capacity by the end of the summer. I also,
just to try to cut you off on the train of thought, though, I'm curious.
Yep.
So it sounds like you're just going back to the original question. Your differentiator is this social purpose thing, and
correct.
That does two things, right? You keep your rates low because it's aligned with that mission.
Correct.
But that has allowed you to, I guess, pitch a different reason for low rates. So instead of saying we're cheaper, come with us, it's, hey, we have this purpose, this social purpose. We're trying to improve accessibility for minority groups or people who otherwise don't have access to lawyers. We're working with all these organizations to make that happen. So I guess that aligns with your pitch and potentially is why you've been able to gain, like, I'm just trying to kind of summarize and spit it back to you.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I'm actually going to a two-tier because I do fractional counsel work for fintechs and startups as well that are more capitalized that can afford to pay more. So in February, I'm rebranding my practice, and as part of that, I'm launching an income-based fee structure. So small businesses will continue to get my low rate, but I'm going to increase my rates for those startups that have been funded already because they can afford to pay a little bit more, and so they're going to be essentially subsidizing the folks that otherwise would get priced out. So yeah, fingers crossed that it works out well. It remains to be seen, but I've seen a lot of support. So I'm going to continue to do this, and I can. I'm pretty happy with what I'm making in terms of revenue. So I think I'm on the right track.
Cool. Dina, I think you had your hand raised at a previous moment. I don't know if you still want to chime in.
That was accidental, but also sorry. I'm hanging out. I am not a fractional GC. Don't kick me out. But I think I signed up because I wanted to actually learn a lot more about other people's fractional GC practices because I think there's some cross pollination opportunities. I'm not competing with you. I'm not in your fight club, so don't worry. And also, I just think there are aspects of the pitching, essentially similar to what you said, Brian, that actually applies to my practice. So that's why I'm here. Sorry.
All right, you outed yourself. You raised your hand by accident. So.
I did accidentally.
Cool. Any other kind of different opinions, unique thoughts, or non-unique thoughts, just thoughts? Anything? Diana.
Making me hit the buttons, Brian.
I don't. You can just chime in.
So well trained. Well, it's interesting to hear how other people are approaching it. I would say that I don't really have a pitch. In my early part of my practice, I had a whole law firm. And at that point, I had my elevator pitch and I would go to all these business meetings and I would do it. But as a fractional person, I only have a certain amount of capacity. And so I don't really market and pitch, and I intentionally don't have a website because I've taken on too much work before and not been able to meet that. And an angry client is not a very good thing. And so I guess what's the definition of fractional general counsel? Okay, other people are jumping in with questions. And I would say a couple of differentiating things for me. I don't really market myself as a GC for jurisdictional reasons, and also because I really prefer to have somebody else as the GC. They really handle the political stuff, and I'm like a doer, get things done, so I'm more of an AGC. I generally do flat fee. I would love to do hourly. Clients don't like it. But when I used to do only templates, then those were all flat fee. And I was just looking at Brian's questions. The whole meeting. Oh, so when I'm in an initial meeting with a client, I don't pitch to them. I don't tell them about my background. They found me somehow. They saw my background. The whole meeting is about them. And so I just say to them, I want to hear what your needs are. Tell me about your business. The goal of today's meeting is to figure out if we're a match to work together. And if we're not, maybe I can help you find that right person. And the net effect of this is that I generally land the client. So my non-pitching does seem to work, and I generally have a pretty good workload.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and no, I appreciate that. That's super helpful, and I agree. So you definitely shouldn't spend a large majority of the time pitching or talking about yourself in any conversation, but especially one where you're trying to learn about a client. And I guess my intention isn't to say, hey, let's all figure out our pitch. I think it's more like internally, how do you view yourself as different? How does that like work itself into the DNA of your practice? Like, what are your North Stars? And I think like I was having a conversation, I think that spawned me to then move that conversation to this agenda topic, which we all kind of have to have some sort of North Star or a set of values or things that make us different, that are even subconsciously driving the way we build our practice. And so that's why for me, like it's good for me to always remember where I came from, my background, my legal background, and my approach to like client satisfaction. That will drive every decision that I make, and weaves itself into that first call. I agree, Diana. This should be all questions, and then if you have 5 minutes left at the end, you could say, "Great. By the way, here's like what makes us different." And I think that's kind of like the seal of the deal. Once you decide you really want this client, like that's the time to kind of just close. But that's just my thought. But I agree with everything you said.
Can I jump in then and answer the question a better way, which is my elevator pitch is I am fractional counsel for emerging technology.
Okay, great. And thank you. I'm trying to see who raised their hand first. I think it was Zach, and then it was Mark, and then maybe Shaz, but I don't know. So I'm just going to go with that order.
So Brian, so one thing I've realized, I've been, outside general counsel, I work for law firms, and also in-house counsel as well. So the big thing I always talk about when I'm talking to my clients is, I've been in their shoes. I've also been executive director of operations. So my goal is to always get to a yes. So something new we're doing in our firm, I've actually teamed up with a platform company where we have the platform management, where we do contract management, legal ticketing, manage their leases, does everything else. So that way we're kind of using technology now instead of having that model where they want to send me an email and ask me a question and give me a project. Now it's a legal ticketing system where they can manage all the projects, see everything right there. And I can also offer them full contract management software system for part of my monthly rate if I'm doing the general counsel work. So typically how I pitch it is I'll discount my hourly rate for a certain number of hours as long as they guarantee to sign a fixed term contract for so long. And with that, they could use the platform. And because I like the platform, then they stick with me even longer for everything. Just because it's cheaper for them to use me as legal and that. So it's kind of a value add with everything.
Awesome. So that's kind of like an operational edge, I guess, which is different than what we've been hearing. And the cool thing is I'll have notes on all this thanks to Fathom. So I'll kind of like outline where everyone kind of is on the spectrum of the different ways in which they view their practice as being different. But thank you, Zach. That's super helpful. Mark, I think you're next.
Hey everybody. Yeah, so I guess my differentiator, I'm not sharing it because I'm necessarily proud of it, because I think it's necessarily a benefit rather than a challenge. But I think unlike most, if not all of you, I'm actually diving into doing this almost as a beginner, as it were. I went straight from law school to doing a venture-backed startup, spun out a startup, then ended up building a 2 podcast over several years in the space with the intent to kind of leverage my way into doing legal work for that particular industry. Then ended up trying to launch a small boutique international consultancy, the so-called smart mobility space, including smart cities, vehicles, kind of that whole sphere. And really only once Gen AI put up on our collective faces, given my love and frankly my knowledge of tech generally, that I decided to restart or stop, depending on your point of view, my actual full-time practice of law. I mean, I've done a lot of part-time stints. I have been recently doing part-time in other fields of law, namely landlord-tenant law, which, I mean, I do it because I can and I have the opportunity, and I guess I'm good at it, apparently. But frankly, not a thing that personal interest in doing, and granted, beggars can be choosers, quite literally. But for me, then the challenge really circumventing this very atypical pretzel-shaped career path to get where I am here now, really trying to shoehorn myself back into it. That's been really paralytically hard, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you come from I guess you started with like, okay, this may be a strength, maybe a weakness. I think a lot of our strengths are weaknesses in a way. So there's probably something there, which it's like, okay, you do have a very unique background. What's the niche that exposes you to, or what's the kind of unique set of strengths that you have that you can offer based on that very unique background?
So just a quick response to that. I mean, what I had tried on quite a few occasions, obviously, was the sort of catchphrase that I'm a founder first, lawyer second. But then it's been recently brought to my attention that there's a fundamental error in this, because frankly, let's say if we use that to then define the ideal client as a cool tech startup leveraging AI, that's just silly. Because A, they either know this stuff themselves, or alternatively, they've already got some super high-end AI folks turning with them anyway. So ironically, that may not be the best pitch at all. Rather, to sort of help reinvent older type of industries to leverage AI, maybe that's a better approach. Either way, yeah, it's been an almost Sisyphean effort, frankly.
Mm-hmm. No, it makes sense. I can definitely relate in that it takes a lot of iteration to figure it out. So it sounds like you're doing that. But I appreciate the candidness. So thank you, Mark. We'll go to Shaz and then Michael after that.
Thank you for the floor. No, I think for me, my big North Star, I raised my hand. It was an interesting question that you asked because I was like, I don't know if I've thought about it that way, but it's, building and being innovative and moving forward in a over-regulated, complicated world, right? And so I also have been in-house my whole career because I was a non-traditional law student. I had worked in financial services before I ever went to law school, and then went straight into financial services with my law degree afterwards. So I have a lot of the more traditional things where I've always been in-house and can do all the things. Like I've been a general counsel, so I can do employment and I can do regulatory and I can do commercial contracts, and I've been at various stage startups. So that's usually one of the things I can talk about where I've kind of jumped in. I usually equate myself to like a either Army or ER doctor, like just throw me in and I can triage and handle all the things. But then my sort of special sauce that I bring to the table that I genuinely enjoy doing is like, I'm a regulatory ninja. So like, okay, there's all these rules and there's all these things and you want to do this thing. So I'm going to figure it out, and my brain works in unique ways already, and I've realized that it can be used for good by seeing all kinds of broken, disparate rules and then finding a path forward, right? And I'll sit with the product people and I'll sit with the marketing people, I'll sit with whoever and do that. So that tends to be where I sit best too. So companies that are highly regulated or really trying to break through some places that nobody else has. And then that plays well with my personal high risk tolerance. So then I usually pair well with founders who also have very high risk tolerance. I will temper them a little bit because we know there is no lawyer in this world that will have as high a risk tolerance as your most risk tolerant founder, but I can match pretty well with them, but then kind of speak their language of I see you, I understand you, without being too overbearing with the rules of, I'm genuinely here to work with you and we're going to figure this out. So in there, that's kind of my differentiator. And because of that, I seem to work best. Yeah, like I said, in the more regulated spaces, trying to help them figure it out. And then whether they see me as a full GC or they see me as someone to come in and sit among a team. So whether that's with the employment team, with the people ops team, whatever they decide to call it, with the developers, whoever it is, I can kind of put on different hats easily with the different folks. Yeah, there you go. I'll stop rambling. I could go on about different things, but I think that's probably the key differentiator.
No, I mean, it's really helpful to see you kind of go through that thought process literally on screen, because I think we all struggle with it, and it's really, we all probably have homework, which I think it's worth mentioning sort of as we get closer to closing this out in 15 minutes. But we all kind of have homework, which is what is our North Star? Like getting it to a sentence, I think would be helpful, and then getting our differentiator to a sentence, not so that we get on the phone and it's the first thing we say, but just so that we know it and we have it to say, wrapping up. And then something similar to what Zach was talking about, having a process. Like my wife runs a home organizing business. I've talked too much about it at this point, but she is really good on the phone because at the end, she has the process memorized. She uses an acronym called SPACE, and it's like sort, purge, A is like something, I don't know, it's a whole process. I should memorize it by now, but I don't. But she just nails it, and then the client immediately feels like, wow, this person knows what they're doing. There was no fluff there. It's like, and for me, I think that probably has to do, like, if I'm talking about my process, I'm like, I always scope things, I always do this. And so maybe just having like writing it down, having 3 sentences I say about my process, and not that everything fits the mold for that process, but having a process or a method of working with a client, and a North Star, so that I can spit it out whenever I need to at the end of a call, when the time is right, something like that. So I think a nice homework assignment will be doing kind of the mental exercise that Shaz just did, but then boiling it down and like reducing it to something that is so concrete that we know exactly what it is. I don't know. That's just my thought as I kind of hear all of us struggle a little bit articulating all this stuff. Michael, let's go to you and then to
I was just going to add the one last thing, just fee structure. I do think mine is just a little bit different from others. It's hourly, but there is a minimum monthly that they will be charged, like 5 hours a week. So they can use it or lose it. So they don't feel bad about it because they're going to spend it anyway. And then otherwise it's hourly, because flat fee just doesn't work. And I also hate having to bill for every single little hour. So that seems to have been the balance that works for folks.
That's cool.
Do you
I
have
like
to keep an IOTA account? Okay.
No, because it's not a retainer. They'll just get a bill.
Can
Oh,
I
you
ask
mean
a
for the service is not rendered? Yeah,
Yeah.
they've always used it. That's interesting. Stay tuned.
Well, you can actually you can put it into your engagement letter in such a way that you say you actually don't have to put it into your ILT, because then you say it's you're gonna use it, or I'm gonna keep it anyhow, so you don't have to put it into the ILT. But you have to have a clause in your engagement letter.
Yeah, and that's there.
Sorry,
Okay.
can I ask a quick question? Do you say you put on like 5 hours per week, and then they either use it or leave it?
Yeah,
Oh,
so they'll be billed for it, and so they can either use it or not. And the thing that has worked out better is to make that 5 hours a week, but ultimately it comes out monthly. So if they don't use it in the week, they use it the following week, it shakes out. I'm not like such an aggressive stickler about just 5 hours in the week.
So if in case they exceed 5 hours, then you're gonna start charging them on an hourly basis.
Yes.
So you
And
still
it's the same rate that the 5 hour was based off of.
So you still essentially have to track your hours, right? You have to track your time, and then okay, got it.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, Michael.
That's all right. It's Mike, by the way. Only my mother, I think, calls me Michael, but I guess my Google name Michael, so it is what it is. So first question about the differentiator, I think probably for me, it's a little bit different than what I've heard so far. I think mine is from mostly derived from having been on both sides of the table. I had a 15-year career at a mid-sized regional law firm, doing work for companies, both on a litigation side, which I fortunately don't do any more of, and also on general corporate business advisement, whatever problem the companies that were clients were working on, and doing that in a traditional law firm role, and doing that on a traditional billable hour rate, and having some limitations that are associated with that, with being really embedded in the company. So my path was more, I had these clients, I've been doing work for them for a few years, they're growing. The pitch for me was really, I think you're better served by me doing this on a fractional GC basis. And that's sort of the genesis of where my path began. And my idea was really, I started doing this right at the beginning of 2020, left my firm at the end of 2019. My idea was, I'm going to get 4 clients to do this, and I'll split them up a quarter. I started with 2 clients that I left with, and started doing the fractional GC work for. And I do hourly. So my billable situation with those folks is I do a fixed fee that we look at it on a quarterly basis. So it's basically a budget tool. I track my time. I look to see where my billable time is being spent and whether I'm winning or losing in that equation. And then we reevaluate it on a quarterly basis. It's pretty, trust sort of situation where we just sit down and look at it and say, hey, I'm billing you this, I'm billing you X, these are the projects coming up. I think we need to move this up, which has kind of been the general path that I've taken, where, year by year, it's the amount I'm getting on a monthly basis is more. sort of my North Star and what I love about what I do and what I wanted to do was I didn't want to do litigation, and I wanted to be embedded in the companies, which and I am. So the two companies I'm doing this for, I'm very embedded. I was telling Brian last week, I bet in both companies, 80% of the people there think I'm a full-time employee. I have an email address associated with the company. For each of those companies, I'm general counsel. I'm on Teams and on Slack, and I'm in their offices periodically. So they view me as in-house counsel, and I like that vibe, and I like that ability to participate in business decisions, not just legal decisions. Like that was one of the things I think bothered me from a law firm standpoint. Is you dive in for this little project. You dive in for this project that's very tight and condensed around whatever that problem the company's having today is, and you don't really have any involvement in anything outside of that circle. So that's probably my North Star, is just being able to combine a legal background with having involvement in the business and the direction of the business, and dealing with people that I really like to work with, and not dealing with anybody that I don't like to work with. That's how I sort of approach it. And a lot like what Diane said, both of the companies I work for have grown a lot over the last few years. So I don't really even pitch it as fractional general counsel services anymore, because I don't know that I have the bandwidth to do another client that way. I pitch more kind of the law firm side of my practice, which is just hourly billing, because it's one-off projects and they're more limited projects, and that's a nice supplement to what I'm doing kind of day to day for the companies I work for. So that's kind of my approach.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I mean, just to sort of summarize with a couple like buzzwords I heard, like embedded counsel is something that I've heard a couple of times, and I like that concept of you almost don't know this person is on the outside, and I think that's like a feeling that you want to give the client, and an approach, so to speak. You're embedded. You're not just a fractional counsel, but you are part of the company. So it's interesting, and would be worth kind of digging into what exactly that means for my own purposes. Mark, I want to go to you, but I know Daniel had his hand raised and then took it down. So I don't know if you want to.
Thanks, Brian. I took it down just to be mindful of time. I'm passionate about the subject, and I'm inspired kind of by everybody's story. I built my entire firm on a subscription model, so I could wax poetic about this and talk about how that works. But we've got 3 minutes. I figure you had homework or admin at the end of this.
Okay, I definitely want to jump to you in a sec. Mark, is your question quick or?
It is a question, but it's tangential. I was just super curious. No, if we don't have time, it's fine. We can discuss later. But I was curious whether anybody's getting real value out of giving CLE lectures, and whether that has direct, impact ROI to anything you're doing.
I don't know if anyone has. How about this? If somebody has had that experience, drop it in our fractional GC chat on Slack so that we can get some answers there. Daniel, I just want
to make sure I'm not wasting my time. Thanks, guys.
Cool. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, Daniel, I want to hear your thoughts, and then I can also send homework on the chat too, so I don't need extra time for that.
Appreciate it. I'll try and be succinct. We have a position that hourly billing is old school. I believe in our lifetimes, our industry is going to be a drive to the bottom, for a race to the bottom of hourly billing, so long as we systematize the delivery of legal services, right? So building out a subscription model has been my way, at least, of growing a business. We're 5 attorneys in total. And so that was my way of actively trying to not practice law, actively trying to run a business that provides predictable monthly recurring revenue. And I think implementing that with tech is at least our differentiator and our approach. And so with implementing AI will be our way, I believe, of making hourly billing obsolete. Not to mention that we get maybe 40% of our billing from transactions in M&A, which I have no idea how to flat fee those. Those have to be hourly. So, I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth here by saying that, but a big part of our model is subscription and flat fees. Somebody asked a question about, and last piece I'll say here, somebody asked a question about how to make flat fees work. It took me about 5 or 6 years, but I think we figured it out. And the reality is they're expensive. You got to pay flat fees in order to make them work. And I could talk more about that some other call.
Yeah, maybe that could be a topic that we hit next time we do this meetup, which will be in a month. So maybe we'll talk about flat fee and billing structure. But yeah, I'll send some homework because let me actually think about what exactly that is. Don't worry, it won't take long and it's totally optional. But I'm going to do it myself, and so it would be cool to see how everyone else thinks about sort of their North Star and pulling it down to sort of a maybe 1 to 3 sentences. But yeah, I found this super helpful. Hopefully you all found it interesting to hear other people's stories and their approach. And yeah, I'll send the notes from all of this on our Slack group. So thank you all. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, everyone.